Thank you very much. Now, the purpose of my chapter, chapter 5, is about critical infrastructure, which I really think is about the assets whose maintenance and durability are critical to the survival and well-being of our countries, societies, and individuals. For a long time, many of us worked with a NATO model which was really based upon military assets, and then we moved on to something which included concepts of heavy industry, such as railways and power plants. But nowadays it is completely different. Very few of these utilities are in public hands, they're mostly in private hands, and yet we may not have sorted out entirely the balance of who's responsible for what in times of crisis. In advanced civil societies, governments retain the responsibility for the safety and security of their people, yet they have a decreasing ability to influence processes or deliver outcomes. That's true across Europe and is a challenge to all the 27 national governments and to a whole range of EU, NATO and other European institutions. Public's expectations are very much higher than they used to be. They are much less tolerant of disruption to their normal lives, and that expectation now exists every day and all day. In purely physical terms, to take one example, we store much less than we used to. The food industry depends on just-in-time deliveries, where even a minor delay can badly disrupt schedules. Storage means cost. Who should bear that cost? Most of the sectors which are relevant to critical infrastructure are highly interdependent, and disruption to one can quickly affect many others. That's true of all European economies. Traditional thinking about critical infrastructure no longer works. The arrival of the internet, discussed in today's media among other things, exemplifies this above all else, but there are many other virtual systems on which we have come to depend completely. That leads us on to risk. How much risk are we prepared to bear? Who should assess risk? Governments, private sector corporations, or individuals? The answer, of course, is all three, but their relative roles remain undefined, which is why there's so much undignified scrabbling about and dumping of blame as soon as a crisis breaks out. To meet that, we have to develop increasingly sophisticated and realistic models about how to assess risk and set up systems to deal with it and mitigate it. Most countries now have the capacity for horizon scanning and compiling risk registers. In the UK, the last government started this off, and I'm sure it will carry on increasingly. Future crises. How many more crises are there likely to hit us like the volcanic ash crisis? And how competent are we at dealing with them? Of course, you can say we mustn't let our imagination run riot. We can't spend lots of money dealing with the what-ifs, especially in a fiscal downturn. We've plenty to worry about now without dreaming up more problems. Every crisis will probably be self-limiting, and vast amounts of work are being done across Europe to develop and strengthen resilience, as the European Union programs of work demonstrate. And looking at this in some detail, it was interesting to me to see how much of this work in the EU is now focusing on cyber, internet, the damage which can happen to communications, both government to public, and across a vast range of sectors. So I think that's a sector which the EU is certainly looking at very hard and which we must all think about more. So what are the policy options? Where do we go with this? I've set this out on page 121. I think we have to start with increasingly sophisticated scanning of risks, looking at what might happen to us in the future, no longer, as we always say, fighting the last war. Then I think we have to work on matrices where we calibrate the likelihood of risk, of the threat, to its impact. And then you get some calibration of where the risk is, and that begins to guide you as to where you might spend your money, either in governments or in private sectors or in individuals. A vast amount of work is going on in resilience. That needs to continue, and it needs to develop so that businesses and others build in resilience to a vast range of risks as part of their corporate overheads. The EU work, I think, will continue, but there's always going to be work for the EU and NATO, work for nation states, member states, for individuals and for corporations. And finally, I think we have to spend some time trying to look at these things in practice, how we exercise across governments and across communities to deal with the things which might come up and hit us.